when I was backpacking in Myanmar. I
Mhm.
took a break from regular life, and I was traveling, backpacking across Myanmar. Asking myself those life questions. The Japanese call it ikigai, where you're
Mhm.
trying
Yeah,
to find your
yeah,
purpose, where you're
yeah.
trying to find your passion. So that's kind of what I found. I realized technology is my forte, entrepreneurship is my passion, and volunteering is my purpose. So connecting them all together, and late 2017, early 2018, I moved back to India, and we started Chezuba, which, by the way, means thank you in Burmese.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Aspire and Acquire podcast. I'm your host, Sandeep Suri. Join me for listening to some incredible stories about some of the best professionals from very diverse fields like combat flying, robotic surgery, dancing, tea farming, journalism, deep sea diving, and so on. These accomplished professionals are not just outstanding in their jobs, but also have unique stories to share with us. We have tried to make the show truly global by having these guests from different parts of the world. Volunteering is a simple yet powerful way to drive positive change, share skills, and connect with causes that matter. It uplifts communities while fostering personal growth and purpose. With technology breaking barriers, it's now easier than ever to share skills globally and drive impact from anywhere. In a world interconnected by technology, volunteering has transcended traditional boundaries, evolving into an avenue where skills can be shared globally, regardless of physical presence. Today, we have invited Sukhendra Reddy Rompally, founder and CEO of Chezuba, who embodies this spirit. Chezuba bridges nonprofits with skilled volunteers in the corporate world, enabling over 400 impactful projects in areas like social media and IT. An alum of IIT, Sukhendra has received recognition for his innovative work, including being named to Forbes Asia's 30 under 30 list in 2020. He is passionate about leveraging technology for social impact and has helped numerous organizations streamline their corporate social responsibility. Let's listen in how Chizuba is writing the rules of the game in this space and learn how skills can be shared globally, regardless of physical presence. Hi, Sukhendra. Welcome to Aspire and Acquire. Good to have you on the show.
Hi, Sandeep. It's my pleasure.
So let's begin the show. Help us understand about Chizuba. What is Chizuba? What kind of platform or product do you have? Could you share the story behind it?
Sure. So Chezuba is an enterprise SaaS platform. We are a corporate social responsibility tool. What that means is companies typically which are larger in nature, let's say 5,000 employees there, thereabout, have a program called corporate social responsibility, which includes employees volunteering in communities, employees to donate to charities. Companies typically match these donations. They also offer grants to nonprofits. So Chezuba is a software platform that enables all of this to be possible. So it's a one-stop platform where employees can volunteer, companies can match employee donations and process grants, and so on. In terms of the story there, Tizuba did not start off as a volunteering or a CSR platform. We started off initially as a volunteer matchmaking tool. So about 7 years ago, late 2017, early 2018, we came together to ensure
And
volunteering is equitable.
sorry,
Yeah.
and that was in India earlier?
Yeah, we started the platform in India. So a little bit of a backstory
Yeah.
from my side. I am originally from India. I went to this university called IIT. In my second year of university, I had an opportunity to volunteer in Malaysia
Mhm.
for a nonprofit. Found that experience to be truly enriching. I thought more young people should have a similar opportunity. So I came back to India and started this nonprofit called ISEC. So started ISEC chapter in IIT Dhanbad. Um, during the during the university time, enable hundreds of students to volunteer from India to other parts of the country and vice versa, getting students from other parts of the country to volunteer, other part of the world,
Hmm.
to volunteer in India. So that's predominantly what I did during the rest of the university. And then once life took over, I once graduation happened, I worked for a tech startup in Russia for about a couple of years, a travel tech
Interesting.
startup.
In
Then
Russia,
I
you
moved to
said, right?
Taiwan. I was working for in Russia, in St. Petersburg, Russia. Then I moved to Taiwan for a gaming company. I was working in a gaming company as a product manager initially, and then was managing the entire India game. Uh, that I did for another 2 years as well. So uh, interesting career options there. But whatever I did, it did not give me as much pleasure or purpose as enabling students to volunteer did. So in the year 2017, when I was backpacking in Myanmar, I
Hmm.
took a break from regular life, and I was traveling backpacking across Myanmar, asking myself those life questions. The Japanese call it ikigai, where you're
Hmm.
trying to
Yep.
find your
Yeah.
purpose, where you're
Yep.
trying to find your passion. So that's kind of what I found. I realized technology is my forte, entrepreneurship is my passion, and volunteering is my purpose. So connecting them all together, and late 2017, early 2018, I moved back to India, and we started Chezuba, which, by the way, means thank you in Burmese. Rightly so, where it started, and we started this volunteer matchmaking platform, which would enable any person in the world to volunteer wherever they are. So it became an online volunteering platform of sorts, if that makes
Interesting.
sense.
Very interesting. Okay. And then you moved to the
Yeah, so
US. How did that happen?
Yeah, so 2018, when we started this volunteer matchmaking platform, like I said, the initial idea was to enable individuals to volunteer wherever they are. So it started off as this matchmaking tool where nonprofits on one side would post volunteering opportunities. To
Hmm.
think of a nonprofit coming and saying, hey, I need help in building this website, or I need this document to be translated, or I need our logo to be designed, or some strategy support in financials, and so on, right? So nonprofits would come and post these highly skilled volunteering opportunities, and individuals, no matter where they were, they could just volunteer for these nonprofits through a click of a button. That's what our initial product was. Our initial business model was where nonprofits were paying us a certain subscription fee, and it was going well for the first couple of years. I think probably towards end of 2019, we became profitable as a company,
Hmm.
and that's when kind of a pivot happened. A crazy thing shook the world called COVID. And
Yeah.
COVID was, in a way, interesting for us because we were a virtual volunteering platform. So once COVID hit, our usage skyrocketed. We had 3x, 5x usage happening over those months when COVID was in its peak. And it was a stronger product market fit where nonprofits needed and individuals wanted to volunteer. And Chezuba was kind of it was kind of the recipe for us. It was perfectly set up. However, the tricky part for us was nonprofits was our business model. And this was the time when nonprofits were heavily cash strapped. And a majority of our nonprofits, we realized, came from um, developing and underdeveloped nations. So think of South Asia, Latin America, think of Africa.
Hmm.
And then when COVID happened, it was clear that these nonprofits needed us, but they could not afford to pay us. And then
Right.
it came down to that ethical dilemma as well, where, okay, let's say a nonprofit which is fighting against hunger, should they pay for our software to organize volunteer versus should they feed five extra people or 10 extra people? And that ethical dilemma was kind of very, very challenging to overcome, particularly, during those times in COVID. And we were struggling to keep our business model as is. The product was thriving,
All
but
right.
we were not entirely sure about if that should be our business model. And that's when magic happened. Tata Group, a large Indian conglomerate, reached out to us. Tata Group at that time had about 900,000 employees. Today, they employ over 1.1 million employees. So Tata Group reached out and they said, we have this huge volunteering program for our employees in over 80 countries, and we are looking to scale that program, but have issues with finding the right opportunities for our employees. came across your platform, seems very interesting opportunities. But we don't want our employees to go and register on a third party tool. So can we create something dedicated for Tata Group?
Sukhendra,
So that was our first.
just for my listeners,
Yeah.
the outreach that happened from Tata's side, not really from Chezuba's side, right?
Yeah, that was more of a timing.
Yeah.
Chezuba probably was there, and
Hmm.
probably, if I'm not wrong, a couple of Tata employees independently volunteered on the platform, and the information was
Uh,
passed on to Tata Group.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So that's probably
That
how the
must be the
awareness
trigger.
happened.
Yeah.
That must have been the trigger,
Yeah.
and likely it's I like to believe it as like we didn't do anything differently, and probably throughout our entrepreneurship journey, there've been these few moments where uh, we didn't do anything differently, but for a long time things were not working, and suddenly there would be something that works for exactly the same reason, that it hasn't worked in the past. So
Yeah.
in this case, the trigger was just that probably those couple of employees, took our idea to right people, and it just worked out.
Excellent.
So um, back to the story, Tata Group reached out, and we decided that they became our design partner of sorts, and we did a pilot for about 200 employees initially, which then became 1,000 employees, uh, to just test out how the product or the service would be for is it fit for a corporate standard, so to say, given that we were always working with individuals until then. And the pilot was a massive success. And even from Tata's perspective, they've always been doing volunteering more in person. And
Yeah.
this COVID change, made them move virtual as well. And Chezuba being placed as kind of an expert in space made it easier for them to transition as well. So overall, it was a massive success. And what it also did is, because of that whole COVID scenario with remote working and all, so many more companies started reaching out to us, or our outreach also started working. We figured out that this seems to be a good model.
Yeah.
Where, to be fair, at that point in time, Tata Group paid us what about 50 nonprofits would have paid, right? So clearly we saw like the scale was on the corporate side. So we had, in 2020 we were still in India, but we had companies like RBL Bank, Act Fibernet, Asian Paints. We were working with companies like these to enable their employees to volunteer. ServiceNow, from what I could remember. So a
Hmm.
bunch of companies, and what was interesting is, as we started discussing with corporate customers of sorts, we realized that our platform is not corporate ready, because
Mm.
when you're an individual marketplace, I think the whole dynamics are different, the compliances are different. But once you start selling as a SaaS platform to a corporate customers, their requirements, the customizations that they want, or the reporting, the dashboard, the compliances, the
Yeah.
security, it's a very different game altogether. So this was also the time which kind of coincided with we getting listed as Forbes 30 under 30. We got accelerated with 500 startups, which is one of the top three, accelerators globally, and things started to probably find direction, I would say, for us, where we were maybe a little lost when COVID broke. Although from a product standpoint, as I said, we exploded, but the growth exploded. But the business model was a little bit in a confusion state. So by 2021, I think we got clarity around what we should be doing if we were to build a truly global scale platform.
So,
So SaaS was the direction that we were taking.
yeah. So we would just like to go a little deeper into the subject of business model. What is Chezuba's current business model and what makes it sustainable for both volunteers and nonprofit organizations?
So again, until 2018-19, the business model was heavily hinged on the nonprofits. They were the paying customer. From a volunteer standpoint, there was no financials involved, but they were willing to do this, obviously, as a part of either they are an employee, so they have a lot of skills and free time that they want to put to meaningful use. Sometimes it was students who needed to do it as a part of their curriculum. So from a volunteer standpoint, the trigger was almost always emotional,
Mhm.
and nonprofits, obviously, it was more logistical needs. So while that business model could have probably thrived, it also meant that the nonprofits that we could serve are the ones who only had that cash. So think of maybe larger nonprofits or nonprofits in developed nations and so on. So when we pivoted to a corporate model, now in India at least, corporate social responsibility is a mandate, is a government mandate.
Yeah.
But globally as well now, Europe's going in that direction as well. There is a law called CSRD in Europe. UK has a social value system. US has a lot of CSR and ESG going on as well, in spite of the fact that there is no compliance yet. So from a corporate side, it's more on the employee engagement and employer branding, and sometimes compliances depending on where the company is based out of. So that's the trigger for them. And the pain point from a corporate side is, I have 5,000 employees in 30 different countries. Now, how do I find volunteering opportunities to each of them? And when employees volunteer, how do I know the data for reporting purposes? How do I make it easier for my employees to volunteer? People come to me and ask for opportunities, and I don't know how to find them for each of them. So it's more about finding opportunities and keeping the user experience professional, simple, and getting the data and reports. That's the pain point that we're solving. So once
Right.
the pivot happened in 2021, we moved to the US, and the business model was heavily hinged on corporates. So today it's a software as a service. So companies pay us typically a per employee per year fee. Think of it
Mhm.
like a seat fee. So if there is a 5,000 employee company, they go into a certain tier, and if they're a 10,000 employee company, they go into a certain tier. But long story short, it is a per employee per year fee, which allows employees to find volunteering opportunities, volunteer on the platform, administrators who are typically either HR or CSR people, for them to gather all this data and just proceed with reporting. So that's basically the hook and the business model from a corporate standpoint. And what we flipped is what used to be previously a nonprofit individual interaction, where nonprofit was the business model and individual was the supporting ecosystem. Here, corporate became our business model and nonprofit became a supporting ecosystem, where we would still onboard nonprofits, maybe a dozen nonprofits a day. Today, we serve almost 10,000 nonprofits in close to 108 countries, if I'm not wrong. So these nonprofits, the problem for them is the same, that, hey, I have a lot of these gaps in talent. I cannot hire a full-time IT person, but I have some IT requirement. So nonprofits challenge is the same, but instead of us charging money, we're making it completely free for the nonprofits, and the money actually comes from corporates in the form of a per employee per year fee, if that makes sense.
Very interesting. Yeah. So it's beautifully, the way I would say is this, that, the nonprofit is being beautifully fed by the corporations, right? And
That's
yeah,
right. So nonprofit, it's a win for a nonprofit
yeah,
because obviously they're getting all these tasks done for free. It's a win for employees as well, because in today's day and world, lack of purpose, just like how I had it, a few years ago, seems to be a very common functionality. And
yeah,
with a lot of distributed workforces, people are disengaged. People want to give back. They want to find purpose in their work, and employees are very disengaged from work. In fact, a lot of studies say almost two in every three employees are actually disengaged from work, and they're not connected to what the
yeah,
company does. So this whole CSR angle makes the employees more engaged, and as a result, the companies gain out of better engagement and hence higher productivity and better overall branding. So it's kind of a win for the corporate as well.
yeah.
And for us as a business, hopefully, it'll be a win in the long run financially as well, right? So just trying to build that ecosystem where it's truly win-win for all the stakeholders involved.
Makes sense. Okay. Um, if I were to ask you, thematically split all the projects that you have at hand, how would it look like at a very high level, three, four themes
Well,
that are merging?
yeah. So what we see is in, there is a gap between what employees want and what nonprofits seek as well. So,
Sure.
for example, one of the gaps that we've observed is a nonprofit which is, let's say, needs support in IT. Some of the times, what we've observed is employees who are from an IT background sometimes also feel like, hey, I've been doing this, in my day job, and maybe I want something of a change, right? So
Mhm.
I'm learning marketing. So can I engage in marketing initiative, or can I engage directly with beneficiaries and let's say coaching and training either nonprofit staff or beneficiaries associated with the nonprofit, could be school kids and so on. So we did observe those little bit of a shift where employees, although they come from certain skill, they are slightly inclined. And of course, I'm not saying this is like for everyone, but we've seen that trend where a lot of employees are seeking opportunities which are more direct impact with beneficiaries. So the projects that we've seen which get taken up quite aggressively would be coaching and training related or management and strategy related, because those are again areas where employees can also enhance their own skills. These are real time projects that they work on. Typically, they get trained on it, but they might not be put on real world problems yet. So solving that problem for a nonprofit at pro bono improves or enhances employee skill as well. So in if I have to pick it in the top three order, that would be coaching and training, management and strategy related projects, and marketing related projects.
Okay, interesting. So let's switch gears now and talk about your global reach. You mentioned that you have 118 countries that you're operating in. Chizuba operates globally, as we all know now. Connecting people from different backgrounds and regions would be a different kind of challenge. How do you handle cultural differences and language barriers in such a diverse community?
Yeah. So when we started off, again, like we always were this global platform. Even before we pivoted to a corporate model,
Mhm.
we had nonprofits from almost 100 countries and individuals from probably about 150 countries supporting these nonprofits. So it was truly global in its sense from a language standpoint, from a time zone standpoint. But again, there were a couple of interesting trends we observed. People tend to support communities who are similar to them. So although the platform was truly global, we did observe that, let's say if it was a nonprofit from India, volunteers from India or volunteers from Indian origin tend to support them more. It's just the community angle. They probably understand the challenges deeper, but
Sure.
also those logistical concerns that you talked about, right? Like, hey, is language a barrier? Now it's not anymore. Or time zone sometimes can actually be a barrier as well. So we did observe those trends in the initial days where people tended to work closely with the other side, which is very similar to them. But having said that, I mean, probably at least half of the times on Chizuba, we had cross cultural collaboration happening. So an employee from TCS or the Tata Group in India supported a nonprofit in Mexico, 12-hour time zone difference, language difference, and this was actually one of the most successful collaborations that we've seen in our history. So there were times when particularly once we switched to the corporate model, it was
Mhm.
not as challenging, because when you think about it, we work with corporations typically which are large. When you think of corporate social responsibility, it's a natural fit for companies which are typically large and distributed and global. So from the employee side, it's almost always is not a challenge because of their nature of work as well, right? They do collaborate with their colleagues in different parts of the world. So it is something that comes probably a little bit naturally to them. So it makes the whole collaboration easier because one side at least is extremely comfortable. And on the nonprofit side, there is an emotional attachment to this, right? Like, oh, someone's helping me, so
Yeah.
let me make things as easy as possible for them to help me. So what could be conventional logic that, oh, the cross country collaboration, time zone, languages, is that a real barrier? Turns out to be not so much, at least in the corporate model. But yes, there is obviously it's a marketplace, so there is a support team involved. So Chizuba does play that intermediary role and make sure whenever there is any kind of miscommunication, whenever there is any gap in terms of communication or culture, we come to fit in. But I must be honest and say, like, we are not seeing it as much as we anticipated it would be.
Yeah. Okay. 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 Let's talk about technology and scaling. How has technology played a role in scaling Chizuba's operations? And do tools like AI ML playing any critical role in your setup?
Massively, massively. In fact, um, Chezuba, when I spoke about Ikigai as well, we talked about technology, entrepreneurship, and doing good as the three pillars. And technology played a massive role in this space. I mean, generally in our lives, but when we even from the early days of just being a marketplace, connecting a nonprofit on the other side of the world to a volunteer on this part of the world. Uh, if not for technology, it would not have been possible. But that Web 2 that we were talking about is honestly basic technology that probably existed in our life in many forms.
Hmm.
But when AI came, I think that probably 2021 is when we started using technology in a much deeper fashion. A couple of examples I can think of are one is low code. So 2021, when we started pivoting to corporate social responsibility model, a key observation that we had is the gap that the market could not provide to current customers was each CSR program was very different. So, for example, a company A would say, "Hey, every time an employee wants to volunteer, they need to get an approval from their line manager." Whereas a company B might say, anybody can volunteer. They don't need any approvals. They have unlimited volunteer time off policy. A company C could say, people could bring their families to volunteer, while a company D might say, the platform has to be super secure that nobody outside the company should have access to it. So we
Hmm.
noticed that companies came up with really different rules and policies and workflows and branding that a one-stop solution or out of the shelf solution might not necessarily make the cut, which is why companies were looking out for solutions in spite of there being solutions in the market at that point in time. So what we realized is CSR is going to be a very customized program for every company, and the software has to support that customization. But if we were to build a product for every single company, that would not scale for us, right? We were not a services company. We had a product that we had to serve. So the biggest challenge for us is like, how do we cater to every single company in the most accurate fashion without disturbing the other company's program when we had the same code written for everyone. So we chose a low code approach and built a very heavy platform with a lot of configuration left. So every single time when a company is becoming our customer, we try to understand their program, and our operations team can configure the platform in such a way that it fits their needs. So there is no code change required at all. So on a high level, we build this whole low code ecosystem and allow those configurations to be done by non-tech people, which made it easier for us to build platforms at scale in a very, very customized fashion. So I would say that was probably our biggest use of technology when entering into the space. And then 2 years later, AI happened. While AI was something that we were considering since 2022, GPT was under the radar at that time. It was not open to public. But obviously, being in the Silicon Valley, we were aware about what was happening as a
Yeah.
trend. So 2022, we started exploring. Late 2022, we probably started exploring. 2021, we had some ideas around it, but 2022 is when we truly started exploring the whole ML plus AI combination. So a couple of innovations that we did in that space was also like, how do we map every single employee's preferences? So let's say whatever data that we have about them on their LinkedIn or whatever content that we could get about them, how do we map them to the most accurate projects? Because we were at any point in time thinking about, let's say, 10,000 projects. So for an employee to navigate, they could use filters,
Yeah.
but even if they would use filters of, I care about animals, I am good at IT, they would find some opportunities. But I think the whole LLM piece kind of made the personalization even better. So we found them the right match, and we also communicated that match to them in a way that would inspire them to
Oh,
actually
so
volunteer.
this
So
was a
that
kind
was
of,
again like for us the basic use.
yeah, so this was a kind of recommendation going from your
Yeah.
side to the employees. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it'll just
Yeah, that
make
was that was the initial idea.
yeah. No, I was just saying it'll just make employees' life much more easier, right?
That's true, but I think the bigger innovation with AI actually came to us late last year or early this year, where another problem that we noticed was there were a lot of opportunities that were being posted on the web, not necessarily by nonprofits who are a part of our ecosystem. So when we, let's say, when we're working with a company which has employees in 30 countries, we might have a lot of nonprofits in, let's say, the US, UK, Canada, India, etc. But we might not have a lot of volunteering opportunities in, as an example, let's say Tanzania or Australia or Japan, where we don't have a lot of nonprofit partners, because again, it's a marketplace game, right? If we don't have a lot of customers there, why would we reach out to more nonprofits there? But when we are serving global clientele of sorts, they had employees in these regions where we were not strong with our nonprofit network. And we thought about what is it that we could do. And what we basically built then is we think of us like Google of sorts there, where we realized that there were a lot of volunteering opportunities publicly being posted on the web, but in different languages.
Hmm.
So we crawled the web to find these volunteering opportunities in each of these regions. Obviously, again, applied an LLM on top of it to figure out which are real volunteering opportunities, which are not, and which fit an employee. So, in addition to the whole, matching
Yeah.
or recommendation
Recommendation engine. Yeah.
model, we basically start an acquisition. Yeah, in addition to the recommendation engine, we started more like acquiring volunteering opportunities for an employee wherever they are as well, right? So as an employee, I just come onto the platform, and based on my location, if Chezuba does not have opportunities, we basically crawl and find opportunities that are near to wherever they are located. If there are opportunities on the web, that again shows up on their system in a recommended fashion. So AI kind of played that role as well, which allowed us to crawl the data and then use that LLM model to figure out which is a volunteering opportunity, which is not, and then make those suggestions accordingly as well. So it allowed us to open up volunteering opportunities not just on the platform, but the ones which existed on the web, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It was more like a push versus pull, right? So that started happening. That must have done the magic or the trick for the employees. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So,
Yeah.
um, what has been the biggest lesson you have learned personally from building and growing Chizuba, and how has it changed you as an entrepreneur?
I would say it actually changes as a person as well. When I started Chizuba, I was 26, not super young, but just a couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 years of work experience, and nothing related to necessarily, startup or social impact space as much. Yes, I had the background of starting up a nonprofit while in university, but never really truly built a team, run it from scratch, and so on. So I would say I was probably young, raw, naive, so to say. In retrospection, that was probably good, because I always think, like, in fact, when I speak with young founders as well, if founders have the question of should they start up or not, they should almost always not start, right? So the rationale or the logic, entrepreneurship is not rational or logical, to be very honest, right? Like, there are far more chances of you failing than succeeding. So if the question has to be addressed in a rational fashion, the answer is no. But I think, again, like when I started young, there was that kind of a naivety, right? Thinking that you are special, so you will obviously make anything work out, and you just start, and does not matter whether you have a salary. None of that matters. Like, when you're young, you're just super passionate about doing this. And I think the first couple of years was purely passion driven, and until reality starts hitting you as to, oh, it's actually not that simple. There are a million things that can break, and only three things that actually work. And the idea is to uh, figure out how how quickly can we figure out those three things, and how do we figure out those three things that actually work. So whether it's about raising capital, whether it's about hiring a team, whether it's about going to the market, building the product, rebuilding the product, branding, marketing, all of this is something that you learn on the go. So I think all the first couple of years was purely driven by passion. Over a period of time, there's more maturity and rational that comes into your head, and then you're trying to figure out solutions from a more business perspective rather than purely a passion game. So in the last 6 7 years, we've raised a couple of $1 million. Obviously work with customers of the likes of Tata, Godrej, VFS, and so on. So we learned a lot. But
Mhm.
in terms of how it changes as a person, I'd probably say the biggest learning for me is resilience. Like I said, a million things go wrong, and it's about just finding strength to hang in there. While passion can get you to a certain place initially, I think it's just the resilience. Passion would not be enough, skill would not be enough. You need a heavy amount of resilience that, I have to just hang in there and make things work out. And like I mentioned a few moments ago as well, many times I don't think we did anything distinctly different and things work out at the right time. Not to say, there is some spirituality associated with it or like, oh, things just work out. But I have noticed this, call it a gut feeling or what you may, but it was very interesting that when things went south, we just worked hard. We didn't do things significantly different. We worked hard,
Mhm.
and things just worked out. So I think that hard work coupled with resilience, there's just no substitute to it whatsoever. No amount of smartness, no amount of innovation. You kind of associate startups with those words, but I think the real meaning of a startup is just being resilient and working extremely hard is what I think is the
Ve-
key. And that's probably made me evolve as a person as well, right? Like today in my personal life as well, when things go south, I know that, oh, I can handle worse, right? Like it's like,
Right.
you have to handle worse on a day-to-day life. So I think it just made me stronger and in a way a little detached to the outcome, right? Like that you just try hard and you wish that things will work out, but regardless of the outcome, you just put your efforts. And I don't think that would have been the case for a younger me, where outcome was all you were passionate about. Right now, I think it's just a process that you just fall in love with, and funnily, the outcome actually turns out to be positive when you truly enjoy the process.
Excellent. This was very, very inspiring, Sukhendra. I know that you are pretty passionate about the subject, but also, as you rightly said, being resilient is one of the most important things for entrepreneurs. About what you do is definitely something touching a lot of lives across the geographies, and wish you all the best. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed hearing Sukhendra's insights on the transformative power of volunteering and inspiring journey behind Chezuba. Sukhendra's vision of connecting people to meaningful causes, no matter where they are, reminds us all of the impact we can make when we use our skills and passions for good. In today's conversation, resonated with you, consider exploring how you might get involved, whether through Chizuba or another cause closer to your heart. Together, we can help build a world where purpose and work go hand in hand. Thanks again for listening in, and we will see you next time with something as exciting as Chizuba. Until then, goodbye and good luck. Thank you. This time, we are bringing you an incredible documentary about volunteering. It's called Living on $1. It's about four friends who dive into rural Guatemala and try to survive on just $1 a day for 2 months. The film sheds light on the harsh realities of extreme poverty, like struggling for food, education, and healthcare, while showcasing the resilience and hope of the local community. It's an eye opening, inspiring, and a must watch for anyone looking to understand the challenges faced by millions around the world.